Oh, hello everyone, it's Susie again, Crypto Granny. Please do look after yourself. I've got another video coming out today because I thought this was really important. One of my clients sent me this. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it, man. It was from Sam, I think. To the lifeboats. I mean, he's a really nice YouTuber. I like what he talks about. I like his face. Good looking guy, actually, I have to say. Very nice guy. But I've got to say, Sam, I don't want to, embarrass you, man, but you're really, off track here. Honestly, you really are. And it's only because you've never worked in financial markets and you've never ran exchange settlement accounts for the banks, okay? And this is not a Ripple threat or an XRP threat, okay? Real-time gross settlement for the banks has always been around. It's been around since 1985, okay? So most banks do use real-time or real gross time settlement. Real gross time settlement should be the other way around, actually. Real-time gross settlement. And, they've used it since, look, I used it in the early 90s, late 80s, okay? And if you look at Wikipedia, and this is correct, real-time gross settlement's been around since probably 1985 as per Wikipedia. And what it basically is talking about is gross settlement, cash settlement within seconds interbank, okay? And what that means is within banks, across banks, okay? It's not available for corporates. It's not available for me, you. It's not available for charities, finance companies, or anything like that. It's only available for the central banks and the banks that operate within that system, within the US system, or the Australian system, or the UK system, that hold exchange settlement accounts with the central banks. Okay, exchange settlement accounts. Now, any bank will operate an exchange settlement account. They all have to. And if they don't operate an exchange settlement account, they actually get someone else, like a bigger bank, to operate their exchange settlement account. So in Australia, there's a lot of retail banks, there's a lot of credit unions and building societies that actually got a banking license rather than a credit bank license or a building society license. And suddenly they were a bank and they had to operate an exchange settlement account, right? Because they weren't proficient and they didn't know how to operate an exchange settlement account, which required real-time gross settlement, they needed to get, say, someone the likes of, say, a Morgan Stanley or a Citigroup or a HSBC to operate their own exchange settlement accounts, okay? So what I want to say, Sam, I don't want to belittle you, but interbank real-time gross settlement's been around for a long, long time. It's nothing new. It's between the banks, okay, and the central bank, and they have to operate within the central bank and their own balances. Now, the Nostro Vostro account, yes, that's a part of it, but their exchange settlement accounts with the central bank or the Reserve Bank of Australia have to be in credit by 9:30 in the morning. So if I was, managing an exchange settlement account with the Reserve Bank, and I'm managing it for, one of the banks that I used to work for, which I won't tell you who, I would have to make sure that my exchange settlement account with the Reserve Bank of Australia was in credit by 9:30 in the morning with real-time gross settlement. And that's what this is talking about, okay? And it's been around for a long time. And within that account, I have to make sure that I had securities that were basically real-time gross settlement securities that were liquefiable within seconds, like government bonds or government commercial paper, not commercial paper, but negotiable certificates of deposit, which were government negotiable certificates of deposit, or high credit rating bank quality NCDs, negotiable certificates of deposit. And also I would have to invest in official cash, which would be through the dealer panel that was set out by the Reserve Bank of Australia, okay, to ensure that my funds are liquid, real-time gross settlement funds, right? So this is not a competitor to Ripple or XRP. This is something, to reiterate this again, this is something the banks have always had, right? It's just that in some banking systems like America or like other areas, excluding Australia, they don't operate exchange settlement accounts with the central bank, and they don't operate real-time gross settlement, right, with central banks or other banks. And what that thing is that you've alluded to is basically saying that they will operate now real-time gross settlement with all the banks and the commercial banks, the retail banks or whatever. But it is interbank, right, between the banks, not between people, not between companies, not between finance companies, not between charities. Now, Ripple and XRP are more for everyone. It's a coin technology for everyone, okay? And that's the thing, you're really missing the point here. If there's no correspondent bank, and I've said this before, if you look at SWIFT, if there's no correspondent bank in the Middle East or no correspondent bank in Africa, which runs 70% unbanked, right, Africa, or South America where it's 40% unbanked, then interbank can't happen. Real-time gross settlement can't happen because there's no bank to run that and there's nowhere to settle. Okay, the beauty of Ripple and its technology and XRP is it settles across exchanges and everything else where there are unbanked options, right? Like in Africa, for example, completely unbanked options, completely different market. Real-time gross settlement for the central banks is so that they know whether the banking system, the overall banking system, is in credit or in debit by 9:30 in the morning. And then they know whether they need to put more money into the system or take money out of the system, okay? So what happens with all the banks with real-time gross settlement, they all do their transactions and everything to get their accounts in credit with the Reserve Bank of Australia. Obviously, the Reserve Bank of Australia or the central bank are the lender of last resort if we cannot find official funds like America did, 6 months ago. They had to make more money in the repo market because the repo market was getting tighter. But that is interbank. It's not available with banks. Interbank means with banks outside. Intrabank means banks within. Intrabanks means other banks outside, right? This is not a replacement for Ripple or XRP because this is only with banks, okay, that are regulated by the central bank. They have all the different Basel rules, they have all the risk weighting rules. It's a completely different market, okay? And honestly, I've got to say, you're really steering, Ripple clients and XRP clients down the wrong track. Seriously. I don't want to embarrass you, man, but this is not correct what you're saying, okay? Because I used to operate, real-time gross settlement with the Reserve Bank of Australia and other central banks around the world, and we had to have an exchange settlement account, which this is alluding to, where we had repo and that, and we could do repo and lend money or borrow money against repo to basically put our exchange settlement account in credit by 9:30. Now, if the banks by 9:30, there's a deficit in the situation, like we can't get our funding, and that's what happened with the US. 9 months ago, we had, they had to open up the repo market and flush funds into buying securities. They buy securities and then cash goes into the system. That's exactly what happens. And so they open up and say, we're going to issue or we're going to buy T-notes or government bonds or whatever. If the system is tight by 9:30 in the morning, 9:30 a.m., the central bank will come in and say, we are going to sell, so we're going to buy treasury notes. If we buy treasury notes, I buy off you the treasury notes, I give you the cash. The central bank's going to give the banks the cash. So it puts more money into the system, right? Plus they're going to increase money supply because there's a deficit in money supply, okay? This is not a competitor to Ripple. I cannot say that enough, okay? It's not, because it's been around for a long time. It's with the central banks and the banks themselves, okay? Now, Australia, all the banks have to have an exchange settlement account with the Reserve Bank of Australia. We had exchange settlement accounts before anyone had them, right? America is behind the eight ball, many ways. It's way behind the eight ball. Okay. Not only that, you know, with a bank, you know, you also have to have limits with other banks, right? You know, like I said with my Swift, okay, you have to have limits, credit limits, settlement limits, counterparty limits, okay, exchange settlement limits for a start. You know, I cannot just borrow, you know, real-time gross settlement exchange funds from anyone, you know, from other banks, unless I have limits in place with those other banks, okay? And that's the thing. If I'm a dealer, I need a dealer's limit with another bank, you know, to borrow exchange settlement limits through RTGS. I need counterparty limits, I need settlement limits, and I need credit limits, right? That my risk have to sign off, right? And it's all to do with the credit rating of the bank, okay? This is not available to the general public, to the millions and millions and millions of corporates out there that Ripple is trying to get, okay? And XRP is going to get. This has been around since 1985, okay, man? So if you want to contact me about this, I'm happy to go on your show, but what you're saying to people is completely wrong. The market, the cryptocurrency market sold off today because there were some terrible economic figures that came out that affected the risk metrics of all risk markets, being the equity market and everything else. And that's why the market sold off a lot. Okay, so this, you know, is pretty important. But if you want to talk to me about it in depth, I'm happy to do that. But, you know, you're completely off the track, man, okay? And, you know, this is exchange settlement accounts and ensuring there's enough money in the system. And this real-time gross settlement has been around for a long, long time, okay? And it's not, I will say it again, it is not a competitor to Ripple or XRP, okay? So happy to go on your show and talk about it, man. Very happy to do that. Cheers. Thank you.